Hello, listening squirrels. I have a headache today. Come on and start complaining. Good morning. I don't usually have headaches. I think it's a little bit sinusy, which I have medicine for that. So I took nose spray and took some Tylenol. I think it's probably from drinking all that contrast. So I'm supposed to drink lots of water. That's what I've been doing this morning. Let's go ahead to our book, which is The Murder at the Vicarage by Agatha Christie, and it's a Miss Marple book. Chapter 5. It was nearer 7 than 6:30 when I approached the vicarage gate on my return. Before I reached it, it swung open and Lawrence Redding came out. He stopped dead on seeing me, and I was immediately struck by his appearance. He looked like a man who was on the point of going mad. His eyes stared in a peculiar manner. He was deathly white, and he was shaking and twitching all over. I wondered for a moment whether he could have been drinking, but repudiated the idea immediately. "Hello," I said. "Have you been to see me again? Sorry I was out. Come back now. I've got to see Prothero about some accounts, but I dare say we shan't be long." "Prothero," he said. He began to laugh. "Prothero? You're going to see Prothero? Oh, you'll see Prothero, all right. Oh, my God, yes." I stared. Instinctively, I stretched out a hand towards him. He drew sharply aside. "No!" he almost cried out. "I've got to get away to think. I've got to think. I must think." He broke into a run and vanished rapidly down the road towards the village, leaving me staring after him, my first idea of drunkenness reoccurring. Finally, I shook my head and went on to the vicarage. The front door is always left open, but nevertheless I rang the bell. Mary came wiping her hands on her apron. "So you're back at last," she observed. "Is Colonel Prothero here?" I asked. "In the study. Been here since 6:15. "And Mr. Redding's been here?" "Come a few minutes ago. Asked for you. I told him you'd be back at any minute and that Colonel Prothero was waiting in the study. And he said he'd wait too and went there. He's there now." "No, he isn't," I said. "I've just met him going down the road." "Well, I didn't hear him leave. He can't have stayed more than a couple of minutes. The mistress isn't back from town yet." I nodded absent-mindedly. Mary beat a retreat to the kitchen quarters, and I went down the passage and opened the study door. After a dusk of the passage, the evening sunshine that was pouring into the room made my eyes blink. I took a step or two across the floor and then stopped dead. For a moment I could hardly take in the meaning of the scene before me. Colonel Prothero was lying sprawled across my writing table in a horrible, unnatural position. There was a pool of some dark fluid on the desk by his head, and it was slowly dripping onto the floor with a horrible drip, drip, drip. I pulled myself together and went across to him. His skin was cold to the touch. The hand that I raised fell back lifeless. The man was dead, shot through the head. So there's our murder. And weird about what's his name going out like that. But it can't be him. It's too obvious. I went to the door and called Mary. When she came, I ordered her to run as fast as she could and fetch Dr. Haydock, who lives just at the corner of the road. I told her there had been an accident. Then I went back and closed the door to await the doctor's coming. Fortunately, Mary found him at home. Haydock is a good fellow, a big, fine, strapping man with an honest, rugged face. His eyebrows went up, and I pointed silently across the room. But like a true doctor, he showed no signs of emotion. He bent over the dead man, examining him rapidly. Then he straightened himself and looked across at me. "Well?" I asked. He's dead, right enough. Been dead half an hour, I should say. Suicide? Out of the question, man. Look at the position of the wound. Besides, if he shot himself, where's the weapon? True enough, there was no sign of any such thing. We'd better not mess around with anything, said Haydock. I'd better ring up the police. He picked up the receiver and spoke into it. He gave the facts as curtly as possible. Sorry, I need a tissue. And then replaced the telephone and came across to where I was sitting. This is a rotten business. How did you come to find him? I explained. Is it murder? I asked rather faintly. Looks like it. Mean to say, what else can it be? Extraordinary business. Wonder who had a down on that poor old fellow. Of course, I know he wasn't popular, but one isn't often murdered for that reason. Worse luck. There's one rather curious thing, I said. I was telephoned for this afternoon to go to a dying parishioner. When I got there, everyone was very surprised to see me. The sick man was very much better than he had been for some days, and his wife flatly denied telephoning for me at all. Somebody wanted him out of there. Haydock drew his brows together. That's suggestive. Very. You were being got out of the way. Where's your wife? Going up to London for the day. And the maid? In the kitchen, right at the other side of the house, where she wouldn't be likely to hear anything that went on in here. It's a nasty business. Who knew that Prothero was coming here this evening? He referred to the fact this morning in the village shop at the top of his voice as usual, meaning that the whole village knew it, which they always do in any case. Know of anyone who had a grudge against him? Know of anyone. The thought of Lawrence Redding's white face and staring eyes came to mind. I was spared answering by a noise of shuffling feet in the passage outside. The police, said my friend, and rose to his feet. Our police force was represented, by Constable Hurst, looking very important but slightly worried. Good evening, gentlemen, he greeted us. The inspector will be here any minute. In the meantime, I'll follow out his instructions. I understand Colonel Prothero's been found shot in the vicarage. He paused and directed a look of cold suspicion at me, which I tried to meet with a suitable bearing of conscious innocence. He moved over to the writing table and announced, "Nothing to be touched until the inspector comes." For the convenience of my readers, I penned a sketch plan of the room. I knew that would come in handy. Remember that? I'll show it again. He got out his notebook, moistened his pencil, and looked expectantly at both of us. I repeated my story of discovering the body. When he had got it all down, which took some time, he turned to the doctor. In your opinion, Dr. Haydock, what was the cause of death? Shot through the head at close quarters. And the weapon? I can't say with certainty until we get the bullet out. But I should say, in all probability, the bullet was fired from a pistol of small caliber, say a Mauser .25. And who was it that had that? Remember? I started remembering our conversation of the night before and Lawrence Redding's admission. The police constable brought his cold fish-like eye round on me. Did you speak, sir? I shook my head. Whatever suspicions I might have, they were no more than suspicions, and as such to be kept to myself. When, in your opinion, did the tragedy occur? The doctor hesitated for a minute before he answered, and then he said, "The man has been dead just over half an hour, I should say, certainly not longer." Hurst turned to me. Did the girl hear anything? As far as I know, she heard nothing, I said, but you had better ask her. But at this moment, Inspector Slack arrived, having come by car from Much Benham, 2 miles away. All that I can say of Inspector Slack is that never did a man more determinedly strive to contradict his name. All right. He was a dark man, restless and energetic in manner, with black eyes that snapped ceaselessly. His manner was rude and overbearing in the extreme. He acknowledged our greetings with a curt nod, seized his subordinate's notebook, perused it, exchanged a few curt words with him in an undertone, then strode over to the body. "Everything's been messed up and pulled about, I suppose," he said. "I've touched nothing," said Haydock. "No more than I have," I said. The inspector busied himself for some time peering at the things on the table and examining the pool of blood. "Ah," he said in a tone of triumph, "here's what we want. Clock overturned when he fell forward. That'll give us the time of the crime. 22 minutes past 6. What time did you say death occurred, Doctor?" "I said about a half hour ago, but..." The inspector consulted his watch. 5 minutes past 7. I got word about 10 minutes ago. At, about 10 minutes ago. 5 minutes to 7. Discovery of the body was at about a quarter to 7. I understand you were fetched immediately. Say you examined it at 10 minutes to. Why, that brings it to the identical second almost. And then here's another sketch, and I can show you that other one. This says Plan B. There was an A earlier. I hope you can see that. I see a glare. We'll go back to that later because it might take me a while to find that. "I don't guarantee the time absolutely," said Haydock. "That's an approximate estimate." "Good enough, sir, good enough. I'd been trying to get a word in. About the clock. If you'll excuse me, sir, I'll ask you questions I want to know. Time's short. What I want is absolute silence." "Yes, but I'd like to tell you..." "Absolute silence," said the inspector, glaring at me ferociously. I gave him what he asked for, so maybe the clock's broken. Even a broke clock is right twice a day, right? I'd like absolute silence. I gave him what he asked for. He was still peering about the writing table. What was he sitting here for? He grunted. Did he want to write a note? "Hello, what's this?" He held up a piece of paper. Newspaper, triumphantly. So pleased was he that his fine that he permitted us. Wait a minute. So pleased was he with his fine that he permitted us to come to his side and examine it with him. A piece of note paper. It was a piece of Vicarage notepaper, and it was headed at the top, 6:20. "Dear Clement," it began, "sorry I cannot wait any longer, but I must..." Here the writing tailed off in a scrawl. "Plain as a pikestaff," said Inspector Slack triumphantly. "He sits down here to write this. An enemy comes softly in through the window and shoots him as he writes. What more do you want?" "I'd just like to say..." I began. "Out of the way, if you please, sir. I want to see if there are footprints." He went down on his hands and knees, moving towards the open window. "I think you ought to know," I said obstinately. The inspector rose. He spoke without heat, but firmly. "We'll go into all that later." Sorry. "I'd be obliged if you gentlemen will clear out of here. Right out, if you please." We permitted ourselves to be shooed out like children. Hours seemed to have passed, yet it was only a quarter past 7. "Well," said Haydock, "that's that. When that conceited ass wants me, you can send him over to the surgery. So long." The mistress is back, said Mary, making a brief appearance from the kitchen. Her eyes were round and agog with excitement. Come in about 5 minutes ago. I found Griselda in the drawing room. She looked frightened but excited. I told her everything, and she listened attentively. The letter is headed 6:20, I ended, and the clock fell over and has stopped at 6:22. Yes, said Griselda, but that clock, didn't you tell him that it always kept a quarter of an hour fast? No, I said I didn't. He wouldn't let me. I tried my best. Griselda was frowning in a puzzled manner. But, Lynn, she said, that makes the whole thing perfectly extraordinary, because when that clock said 20 past 6, it was really only 5 minutes past. And at 5 minutes past, I don't suppose Colonel Prothero had even arrived at the house. That's all in chapter 5. Wow, a lot of things to take in. Let me bookmark that. Okay, let me go back. See if I can find that other sketch if we need it. I think this was the outside of the, this is the outside of the Vicarage. I had that bookmark. Maybe I need to keep that bookmark in case we need to come back to it. That's the outside of it, I think. Well, yeah, it shows some of the roads and stuff, but it also shows the inside where the kitchen, the study, and all that stuff is. So, if you ever need to see these again, just put it in the comments, I reckon. Well, we got the murder now. The man that nobody much cared for. But golly. And it's just weird, isn't it, about the clock? And I don't know. Just have to think about all these things, won't we? I hope you enjoyed it. I did. And I did it earlier, so I was awake, but I didn't sleep worth a darn last night. That may be one reason I got a headache, too. I'll get in here and try to stitch a stitch or two and go. I'm going to try to get to Dana's, because it is almost time for Dana's craft hour right now at 9. It's 9:27, and she comes on at 9:30, I think. I mean, she normally does. I love y'all. Be sweet, don't be ugly. I'll see you in the YouTube streets around. I think Kelly's on later today, and I'll be around. See y'all. Love you bunches. Did I say be sweet, don't be ugly? I think I did. Bye.